Hi there. Let's take another look at this vintage Boker camp knife. This is the second video I've done on this knife. The first video was just a short video to show the knife in its unclean, unrestored state. I've had a chance to work on it and I'm ready to take another look at it with you. Before we look at this knife specifically, just let me talk about these knives in general for a second. You know, these are kind of a classic pocket knife. If you're into collecting vintage pocket knives, you probably know about these, maybe even have one or have one on your list. But they were really one of the first multi-tool pocket knives. Boker came out with these in 1869, and that was even before Swiss Army knives were invented. They've kind of always been the flagship of Boker's pocket knife line. They still sell them today. This is their recent catalog. They're premium knives. They're quite expensive, but they're built pretty much just like they were back in 1869, and they are built to last. So the first thing that I did with this knife, and I debated doing this, but I went ahead and just submerged it in a hot bath of sudsy water and gave it a good scrubbing. You can use a soft toothbrush or a small paintbrush to do that. I worried about it at first with these scales, but then I thought, well, you know, if these scales can't get wet at least once, then they weren't a very good material to make knife handles out of. So I knew that they were, and I didn't really worry about that. When I made the last video, I spoke about these being bone. After further reflection, I think they're staghorn. I mean, that just looks like an antler to me. I was a little thrown by the color. They were dirty and they've yellowed. But to me, that looks like staghorn. I'm not an expert here, so if you have any thoughts on that, please weigh in. But if that is a staghorn scale, that's a premium feature. And even was, you know, back in the day when this was made. Now, these knives originally have a bail or shackle at this end. This one is missing its bail. So what I did there was I just ground down the pin and then I sanded and polished the bolsters. Now, those dings you see around that pin, that's not my doing. Matter of fact, I cleaned that up quite a bit. This side's a little more indicative of my handiwork. Now, these scales do have cracks in them, but they are quite stable. And while I'm on the subject of the scales, the way I clean those, when I was finished doing everything else with the knife, I dampened a rag with a soft rag with a diluted solution of Murphy's wood soap and water, and just rubbed it until I got off any remaining soil, and then I came back and I waxed it. And I just use a neutral shoe polish wax. If it won't hurt leather, it won't hurt this. Here is the Boker tree shield, the tree brand shield. It's kind of their famous logo. They actually had a big chestnut tree outside of their factory in Soligen for many years, and so that's why they chose that tree symbol. If your badge is a little oversized like that and does not say Soligen under the tree, you have a pre-World War II knife, so you have a rare, harder to get knife. Okay, so let's just take a look at the blades and the tools. If you watched the last video, you know how trashed the blade was. I mentioned in that video that I wouldn't be able to get out these deep scratches that you can see, but I did give the knife blade an overall sheen and a good edge. Tank stamp on this is H. Boker and Company with Soligen underneath. And I'll show you a chart in a moment of Boker tank stamps that helps date knives. And on this side, you see the, let me wipe that. This knife is still bleeding some corrosion from the joints. What I did to get the action better, this knife of course was quite stiff. I don't think this knife had been cleaned in decades and never refurbished. But I did go ahead and squirt WD-40 down in the joints and in the springs. Being careful not to get it on the material here on the scales and let that soak in. Then I worked them quite a bit and I oiled them with a penetrating gun oil instead of my normal mineral oil. I just needed something with a little more viscosity and a little more cleaning power. But they've loosened up quite a bit. So on this side you have the tree brand symbol again, and stainless in 3 different languages: German, English, and French. Stainless was an invention from 1921. I know Victorinox started using it on their knives in 1923. So it seems to me that like Boker was making a big deal out of the fact that this was stainless. That might have been kind of a premium upgrade. Most of these knives that I've seen have been carbon steel right up through the 70s. So the blade's mostly there. It doesn't look too bad from a distance. It does have these scratches that can't be removed, but I don't know, maybe that's better than just a rusty old carbon steel blade. And it does have some play here with a weak spring lockup. It's okay side to side, but we've got a little movement here. Small blade also has a tank stamp H. Boker and Company Soligen. And on this side, again, the tree symbol and the word Rostfrei, German for stainless. Also polished and sharpened that, and it exhibits some heavy scratching. This blade looks like it's really wasted, but it's not. I mean, they all came with this really deep shoulder here, this real deep choil. This is kind of like a standoff, I think. Let's leave this open so we can look down inside. Here is the old style can opener. It's in pretty good shape, cleaned up well. And on the back, if you look carefully in that lower right hand corner, you'll see the tree symbol. Every single tool on the top of this knife has that tree symbol. Here's the screwdriver cap lifter. Again, in that lower right hand corner, there's the tree symbol. While I've got it open, we'll just look down inside. Nickel silver bolsters, but brass liners. And I got that knife considerably cleaner than it was. It was gross, a real mess down inside. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's a slot in that brass liner on the bottom there. This shield is not glued on. It's actually pinned through both the staghorn scale here and the brass liner. It's got like tabs that fold down and hold it in place. So really built to last. The emblem was a little loose. It kind of wiggled. And there was a hole right here in the scale material. So I filled that with clear epoxy. I thought about using a colored putty, but I really couldn't get anything to match. And the clear epoxy is just kind of invisible. Kind of just, matches the other colors. And it served 2 purposes here. It filled the void to keep dirt and stuff out of there, but it also stabilized that badge. Getting a little snap back on some of these tools, not all of them certainly. The back tools, there is a large, long, sharp corkscrew. There again you can see the brass liners. I like to do an extra careful job cleaning them there. That didn't even look like brass when I started, but it shows a lot there, so it's a good place to show it off. And then here's the awl. Back tools have snap. The awl's in fairly decent shape. I don't think it was used nearly as much as the other tools. So you can see I wasn't able to get all of the staining out of the springs down inside, but the knife is considerably cleaner than it was before. Okay, I think that's all I want to say about the features and condition of the knife. Let me just say this. Turns out Boker knives are notoriously hard to get information on. And I think the biggest reason is late in World War II, in November and December of 1944, the Allied forces bombed German cities, particularly industrial sites, and they blew up the Boker factory and destroyed it and all the records with it. So that makes it hard to get information. Also, it's confusing because there's a Boker USA, and this knife is not to be confused with the Boker USA scout knives that you often see. Those were 2 separate companies. They were related by family, but 2 completely separate companies. Boker USA used to import knives from Boker, Germany, from Soligen, and make their own knives like that Boker scout knife. It did not generally have back tools, so you didn't get this interesting shape, and they weren't as high quality. Anyway, I was able to go to the Boker website, Boker's German website, and I got a link to an article that turned out to be extremely helpful in identifying and dating Boker knives. It was an article from Knife World from November of 2009, and I'll put a link to that link in the description box below so you can go look at this if you'd like. They wrote this, I guess, on the 140th anniversary of Boker, and it was a 10-page article, but the money page, if you will, was page 10, where they give you a chart that has a lot of different Boker tang stamps and tree symbols and things to help date the knife. So the tang stamp that's identical to my knife is right here, H. Boker and Company, with Solgen underneath. They've given it a code, G9, and they say circa 1869, when those knives first came out, to 1944, when the German plant was destroyed at the end of World War II. So that's a huge date range. We can narrow it down some. They go on to say it's usually found on larger knives. And then down here, there's the key for the codes. G is always German. G14 through 15, which would encompass our knife here that we're looking at. They have a tree on the reverse. Variations in tree style are useful for dating knives only in a general sense. Bokers with the tree on the back of the blade are usually, but not always, earlier than those with a front side tree. So this one does have the tree on the back. A little further down, an umlaut over the O in Boker means the knife is 1932 or later. This knife does not have an umlaut over the O. And then finally, German Bokers with a large round tree shield, no Solgen, are pre-World War II. Those with a round Solgen tree shield are post-World War II. So we know that this knife is pre-World War II because it has no Solgen on the shield. It's somewhere between 1921, when stainless came out, and 1944. It might be earlier than 1932, but certainly no later than 1944. So yeah, really a really collectible vintage knife. You know, again, it was heavily used, pretty tired, but it's clean now and it's visually appealing. I'm happy with it. I was going to do some before and after pictures, but as I've mentioned before, you know, Google killed the YouTube video editor. That's not a problem for a lot of people, but if you're a Chromebook user like I am, you have found that there are no good video editors for Chrome, at least not free ones. So that handicaps me a little bit. Be sure to follow me on Instagram if you're interested in the knives that I will be offering in the future. I'm going to be doing a little more of that on Instagram and a little less of that here on YouTube. So I hope that was helpful and some good information for you if you're interested in these old knives. Maybe that gave you some resources. If you have any information on these or just old Boker knives in general, please share that with me. That would be super helpful. As always, I thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and have fun collecting.